So, hey, Mike Panacchi here. I'm with Tony Fortunato with the tech firm. Tony and I have known each other for, we'll call it ever. And one of the things that we were just talking about that comes up all the time is, yeah, it seems like a lot of times when we talk about different products, somebody comes back and says, well, couldn't I just do that with a laptop and, an old wireless NIC or something like that? And so I thought, what a great opportunity to talk and just kind of share our thoughts on that. So it's good to see you, Tony.
Good to see you too, Mike. This will be fun. We're actually just gabbing
Yes,
and recording. Keep it clean.
exactly. So, it's funny. Tony, how did you get into this? How did you get into network troubleshooting?
Oh man, that was a long time ago. I was a mechanic, GM, and I was the young guy in the room. And guess what? Computers are coming into these cars. So young guy, go take a computer class. And then I got myself a work term, and it just went from there. So I was doing landscaping, working at my cousin's furniture store, and working at GM. So I know Mike's got a similar story.
Yeah, I started out with a truck company and working out not on the assembly line, but I was working in the computer room and there weren't a lot of tools out there to do what we needed to do. And in fact, I ended up leaving that company because I'd written some Visual Basic that was doing SNMP queries. And Tony and I both ended up working for a company doing network troubleshooting full
Yeah,
time.
that's right.
And so a lot of that was started because I was having to build my own tools to do a lot of this.
That was Peterbilt, right?
Peterbilt and Kenworth, yeah, they're both owned by the same company. And so the thing that comes up a lot of times with why can't I just do that without this? Yeah, there's a lot of things we need to do that we just can't do with a old laptop or an old phone with some free software.
Yeah, and there's a and you know what? We could take it the other way and just say there are some instances where you can use an old laptop or put Wireshark on a computer. I think the issue I run into is most technicians don't know the breaking point. They don't know when to draw that line and say, I need an actual appliance. I need something built, for example, to capture a packet. Just because your NIC says gig doesn't mean you can capture at gig rates. You know what I mean? So if you are, Sally's at her desk checking her email and you want to capture some packets, yeah, go for it. But if you've got yourself tapped into some fiber between two switches, I don't think you want to be doing that, right?
Well, you've done a number of videos on testing your test tools, right? I mean, I know that's something you're big on, is how do you know if it's really doing what you expect it to do?
Yeah, and unfortunately people get mad at the messenger when you deliver the bad news that, hey, you know what? That little green light in that gig doesn't mean it's a gig, and then all
Yeah.
those errors you see aren't errors just because you didn't get all the packets. So I can't stress this enough when I go to my, I'm going to say, troubleshooting engagements. When I can bring stuff, I always bring like a cable tester, or I bring like an IOTA, like a packet capture tool, or I bring a link runner or whatever. And you'd be surprised how many times people say to me, wow, A, I didn't know that existed, and B, that's so much quicker than what I was doing, because I was pinging and nmapping from my PC, and you know what I mean, trying to figure things out, and 20 different commands later, and the guy who knows how to do it isn't here this week, so I kind of have this thing written down on a little sticky note, and it's silly. And that way you get yourself a proper tool. And even like the good old OptiView days, I know you see it right over
Oh,
my
yeah.
shoulder, right? You
Yep.
you bring that thing along, and people are just blown out of their socks, and you get an appreciation for it. Hey, they're built for a reason, right? And guess what? If Mike wrote the scripts, Mike's better be there to support those scripts, right? There's that.
Right. Yes. I mean, you mentioned Nmap. How many command line switches are there in Nmap? And not that, it does a great job and it really does what it's designed to do. But I think about, and, you mentioned Profitap. I had built a little Linux box that ran T-Shark that captured files and wrote them to a directory. And I even set up web access so I could get to the directory. And if I knew the time frame, I could grab the files off. And then I started working with Profitap, and it's like, man, I can just select the time frame
Yeah.
and I can set a filter on the address I'm looking for, and I can get that. Because in the end, It's all about how fast we can solve the
Yeah,
problem.
that's right.
And I think that sometimes, and we do it to ourselves with, tools and outside of networking, trying to save a buck and end up costing us a lot of money sometime
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. And the opposite, more dollars than common sense sometimes, right? Because the last guy I talked to had a good old USB flash drive with a whole bunch of stuff on it. And said, "Hey, I just plugged this into the laptop and I can capture packets." And I go, "What are you capturing from?" They go, "What difference does it make? It's gig."
Eh,
You know what?
maybe.
It doesn't work that way, really. But
No.
but you know what still kills me, Mike? People still don't get that you can have 90% utilization on a network with a large packet size and never know what's going on. You can have a low utilization with an extremely small packet size, and you can gum things up pretty quick, from access points to routers to especially IoT. I don't know about you, Mike. IoT devices, those things can't take very much. So they gum up pretty fast, from smart plugs to thermostats to whatever. And I struggle trying to explain to people this the good old packets per second discussion we always have, right? And they don't get it. They're like, I don't. So it's 20% utilization. Who cares? Yeah, but 20% of a gig when you have a 128 byte packet, it's kind of a big deal, right?
Well, I was at a manufacturing plant, and their robots would just grind to a
Yeah,
stop.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they
yeah.
said, "What's going on?" Well, what happened was they had the robots and the cameras that were monitoring the production lines that were sending all their traffic out via multicast, all on the same broadcast domain. And the robots were like designed in a vacuum where the only traffic they ever expected was their traffic, and we could stop them with a ping. If we sent enough pings to them, we could just make the robot stop. And so, we implemented IGMP snooping, and we got it narrowed down so the multicast only went where the multicast should go. And but yeah, I mean, it's the other one I think that I'm finding. One is PoE, that I haven't found a free device that really gives me the insight that I need into PoE. And if I need to know that PoE is working well, I need something that is going to be able to not only measure it, but be able to apply a load and make sure that I'm getting delivered the PoE I expect.
Right. And then you get everything else along with it. It's got to be a good footprint. You got to be able to carry it around with you, good battery
Yep.
life, and reporting, right? So because we know at the end of the day they're not paying bills until they see you write something. So it'd be
Yes.
nice to say, here you go. And I'll be honest with you, right now I'm working on a contract, and they have a considerable amount of cabling issues. And the only reason why it's coming up now is because they've gone to gig, and they got a lot of PoE devices they never had before, from cameras through access points, that don't like marginal cabling. You know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I always joke we wake up in the morning and see what's flapping, because sure enough something's got plugged in and something wasn't working quite right, and so on and so on and so on. Just last week we had somebody move the access point to different drops, and this is brand new cabling, and I'm surprised at this. They went to 4 different drops, and all 4 of them the access point would not stay up longer than like 30 seconds. So I had them bring the access point right into the wiring closet, plug it right into the switch, no problem. Left it overnight, no problem. The next morning went to the opposite side of the floor, stayed up, no problem. And I asked them, I said, did anybody test these drops? Well, we plugged them in and the link light came on and we could get on the internet. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty well it.
Well, that was, I did that live stream yesterday on testing SFPs. And one of the things I love about doing these presentations and teaching classes is when I'm not teaching, I get to spend my time building things that aren't right.
Yep.
And it's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
But one of the ones I did, and I've got a set of, I think I put them away already, but they're fiber optic attenuators. So they're 10 dB attenuators. And I stuck those on the link. And what would happen is we get a link. It linked up at gig, but we can't get an IP address.
Yeah, I saw that video. I saw that in your video. Yeah, that was cool.
And so if you're just going by link light, now we don't know what the problem is. So being able to bring that link up and being able to measure that power. In fact, one of the things that came out of that, all this testing I've been doing, you were talking about ubiquity. These ubiquity 1 gig transceivers or SFPs actually have had some of the best results as far as accuracy with optical signal level.
Wow.
So like in the link runner and
Yeah, yeah.
Etherscope and so on, this has been the one I've found that tends to give me the most accurate results for optical signal strength. And but what I had to have a very accurate power meter to compare that to, right? So in that case, I was using, the Fluke Certifiber Pro because I know that's been calibrated. I know that that's going to give me those most accurate results. And Wi-Fi is a whole nother one. Just trying to do a Wi-Fi capture without a dedicated tool to be able to get in and capture the packets. Now, once we get the packets, we could go in with Wireshark or something like that and take a look at them. But you got to get them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and unfortunately, some people think you just capture wireless packets, and they forget you need the beginning of the trace so you can apply some sort of key to it,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen that quite a few times here. I got 300 megs worth of stuff, and I go, "So where's the key? Did you get the beginning of that?"
Nope. You didn't
Okay.
get the handshake? Nope.
And what are you going to do, right? And that's unfortunately sometimes that's how you learn. School of Hard Knocks. You just like, you got to go back and do it again. But
Yeah.
I find what I'm finding though lately is, and I don't know why, more network technicians are more open to trying new tools, whereas in the old days they had their favorite tool and they would prop doors open and crack walnuts with it and just do as much as they can with that one tool. Like remember the sniffer days, and they would
Yeah.
everything would be everywhere you went you'd capture. I don't care if the building's on fire, we're capturing packets. Like it's you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's got nothing to do with any of that, but I don't care. I paid 80 grand for this box and I'm capturing packets.
Yep. Exactly.
So
I used to think that some places they would just wave it over the router
yeah,
thinking that that was going to solve it. We
yeah,
have a sniffer.
that's
So
right.
that's going to solve the problem.
Yeah, and I always tell people when they have it running on the shelf, 724, I'm like, what are you guys doing with this thing? Oh, we've got it running. Yeah, because you're looking for.
Yeah.
I'm like, hello,
Something.
anything.
There was a tool, the show tool time with
Yeah, yeah,
Tim Allen,
yep.
and his wife cooks the engine in their car. And he said, didn't the light come on or something? And she said, yeah. And he goes, weren't you concerned? She goes, well, I thought if it was important, it'd get brighter or something. And, that always just cracked me up because it's like, we're one place I was at, they had SNMP traps just rolling by the screen. And I said, how do you know when something's wrong? Well, somebody calls. And so that is building those capabilities in that we can't do with just an off the shelf tool. And you brought up something earlier about scripts as well, and that is having it be transferable. And I know that, a lot of us like to think of ourselves as the indispensable person that anytime there's a problem, we get called. But then what happens? You're on vacation, you're trying to take a weekend, you're trying to do something, you're getting phone calls. And it may make us feel good about ourselves, but what we need to do is we need to make sure that next person that's coming in is able to use those tools. And I think we owe it not only to ourselves, but we owe it to our companies. They're not paying us to make ourselves indispensable. They're paying us to fix a problem as fast as possible.
Yeah, I started this contract back, I'm going to say October-ish. And the very first thing I did was start documentation because what they had was pretty old and it wasn't very accurate. I've lost track of how many documents I've written for them now on how to install a router, how to install a switch, how to recover one, how to troubleshoot, how to blah, 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 blah. And it just goes on because you're right. And then, so tomorrow, if I'm not working and somebody needs to troubleshoot a router, there's dozens of documents. They just go down, the recipe list and find whatever, and they can start poking around. I think that's kind of important because some people think you keep the cards to your chest and you've got some job security. And it's actually the opposite. I've found in my career that the more you share and the more you do, the more valuable you become. And even with this contract, every week I do a class. I train the troubleshooting guys, the desktop, the help desk, and the server application guys all sit on a call and we do troubleshooting. And I even tell them, you're never gonna install a router, but you know what? I want you to go through it so you understand what's going on. So if something weird happens, something will click and you'll say, hey, maybe it's that setting in that router.
Right.
Yep. And just like your SNMP thing, this router behind me, I have this router and I plugged it in and I thought I want to show people how to use a syslog server. So I set
Okay.
up this router to go to syslog server and it was working fine. I was using it for about a month. And Mike, it was barfing nonstop. Errors, SSH crashing, and this dump and this reset and that. And I go, that can't be normal. I've got a router just like that. So I checked mine. Nope, quiet as a mouse. And I was like, what's going on here? So long story short, I actually had to do a full recovery on that because the firmware was corrupted.
Wow.
But I didn't know it was working.
So out of curiosity, what are you using for a syslog server?
Well, there was this free one I found for these guys. I can't remember what it's called right now. Virtual syslog or something or other. I'll give you the link later. We can put it in the notes. But it actually worked very well. It's free. There was no ads, and it's got a lot of features in it. But I was trying to explain to these people that you have all these different devices. It'd be nice to put them all into one spot. But then you gotta know what you gotta look for, because like you said, you could just sit there streaming ad nauseum, and you're just like desensitized. You're like, right?
You give up, and then it's the problem that we've had forever, and that is that people use their coworkers as the smoke detectors, right?
Yeah.
It's like if I didn't put in a fire detection system, but I said, somebody will call.
Yeah.
If there's a fire,
they'll figure it out. It'll get brighter.
Exactly.
Yeah. And right now I have a switch, the port's flapping like crazy over 400 times in 24 hours, just out of the blue. So I told the team, I said, and this is so ironic, Mike, it's in the IT building on the IT floor. And I'm like, just go over to that office, will you? And the guy today said, well, she hasn't complained yet.
Yeah.
You're waiting for? I said, it could be anything. Maybe it's just loose. Maybe she's smashing with the back of her chair. Maybe the cable's damaged. Who knows, right? Like, come on, let's go, guys. So I'm trying to politely get people to do things proactively and pay attention to what they normally just like, because I found a lot of issues, quote unquote, and fixed a lot of things that have been outstanding for months just by saying, hey, what is that? And like you said, applying the right tool. And then there's your answer. And it's like, yeah, that wasn't too bad, was it? And it doesn't take a lot, but like back to the original point, some of these tools, like special purpose tools, they come right out and tell you. They can also lead you down a rabbit hole, but they do a pretty good job of summarizing and saving you a lot of brain cells. Because like you, I write a lot of scripts and whatnot, but I don't know about you, but I put a ton of comments in them. And, sometimes even a Word document. And I'm like, hey, this is yours. Have fun. It's not mine anymore. Goodbye.
Yes. Yep. Well, and that's, one of my customers had some Cisco 9000 48 port switches, and they've got 40 gig uplinks on them, and they were dumping them. And they said, hey, you want some? So I just put one in. I think it's doubling my electric bill.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
It's a nice switch. Well, making sure that that's all set up. I wanted to see, hey, am I getting an IP address on the right VLAN? I don't want to drag my laptop over there and plug my laptop in. I want to be able to grab something, plug it in. Did I get an address? And then, like you said, if I did, I want it reported back somewhere. So I have a document that I have something that tells me this is the port I was on. I was able to get a connection on there. I'm on the right VLAN. So now that's documented, and I don't have to try and write that down somewhere. If I have something set up for PoE, I want to know that like I said, I want to get the PoE. And if the cable's not working, and I know before we got started, you were saying you've been putting in NVR systems. I just bought a Reolink NVR here, and it does a great job. I can now filter on all the animals that come wandering through the yard at night. But the cables that came with it didn't even have any markings on them. And when I threw the Fluke Link IQ on there, it wouldn't even pass at 10 meg. And so, it's one of those things where how would we know that if we didn't have the right tools to go in and test it? And then do I want that? So now when they're complaining, well, not they, it'd be me, but now when my video doesn't look right, is it the camera? Is it the NVR?
Yep.
What is it?
Yep. And I just used the link runner the other day to show somebody that. Brand new camera, little cables, plug it in, 100 meg. Then I reach in the drawer, grab the proper cable that we have, that we know works, put it in, gig.
Yep.
And they're looking at me saying, "Oh, so what's wrong with the other cable?" I go, "I don't care. We know we don't want to use it for this." And I said, "And it's 100 meg, but you don't know what it's doing. We aren't looking at the errors on it. We don't know if there's something wrong with it. We don't. But the point is, if it's not getting you a gig, that's kind of a big red flag for me personally. I don't know about you. It's like, let's not.
Well, because our data rates don't go down,
Right.
right? I mean, it's
That's
not
right.
like we're going to go back to 10 meg, and our power doesn't go down. Our power only goes up because now you've got a heater in there, you've got a PTZ camera or something
Yep.
like that. And it's that, well, the device I had in here before worked, and now this one isn't working. And so what, and it goes, and that's part of troubleshoot. We look at what changed. And so we say, well, we changed the device. So maybe it's the device, but maybe it's that whatever was in there wasn't working the way it was supposed to. It worked just good enough for the previous device.
Yeah, there's a couple of new guys, desktop guys, and they're a hoot because I'll ask them to check stuff and they'll say, they aren't complaining, right? And I'm like, and then they go back to the old, well, it worked fine before. So how do you know? And then here's the best part. I asked the client if they changed something and they said no. I said, well, yeah, of course they're going to say no. What do you... Like, I would love to hear somebody say, yeah, I changed the patch cable. I got a new laptop, a new docking station.
And so what could, yeah. I mean, we could do a whole nother one of these on
I know, right?
funny things we found. Yeah. I moved my desk and now my computer's not working.
Yeah.
Okay, well, tell me more about that. Well, I moved it. I had to extend the cord, so I grabbed this cord. It's that silver satin phone cord, huh?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
But it plugged in. The plugs fit. So, yeah. So it's, maybe for home, maybe for a lot of stuff, running Nmap, running Wireshark. And I guess, when it comes to Wireshark, I am thankful that Gerald Combs' company wouldn't pay for him to get a sniffer, because we really have all benefited from that. So there's a case. So, if you're going to do it, write it, give it to everybody, and make it really powerful. And there are free tools. I used to, when I was teaching at Interop, I used to give out a CD of all the free tools: Cacti, Wireshark, iPerf. Great tools. And they work well. But when I need to test a link at 10 gig, full line rate, full duplex, I don't trust that iPerf is going to do the job for me. It's not going to show me, the level of detail that I need to see.
Well, and these special purpose tools also give you a lot of leeway in the sense that you get a chance to breathe because everybody else gets to do the same thing you did and it's done the same way. The tool's doing it. So I can give my link runner to the junior guy to run out and check a drop, and I don't have to ask him what test he ran. I know he plugged it in, hit the big green button, and it went up to the portal, and I go to link live, and there's my results. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to walk him through that anymore. He's obviously going to go plug it in. And after that, it's just a matter of making sure people can interpret what they're seeing. And I don't know about you, but I strongly suggest to people, especially in the networking field, they at least have a toner and a wand or even a good old butt set. I don't care what it is, because I just ran into a problem with the local gym. They're recabling because I showed them, I don't know why they did this. We lifted a couple of ceiling tiles up, Mike, and there was a whole bunch of cables that were cut and spliced. And the guy was saying to me, he goes, yeah, I don't know when this happened. And I was like, well, how long you been here? He goes, oh, almost 20 years. Okay, so... And he suspects that at some point somebody was doing work, cut the cable, says, oh darn, and just went back and quickly got some electrical tape and wrapped it all up. And you know what? When it was 10 and 100 meg, maybe they can get away with it. But right now he's putting these cameras on the end of these lines and the cameras are dropping all the time. Well, guess what? Right? So he's gotten so frustrated. There's only 20 drops in that place. He's just got a whole bunch of cable, and now he's pulling new cable from one end to the other. If you're going to do it right. But here's a toner. And he was surprised when he put the toner on one end and went to the wand on the other end and couldn't hear anything. And he goes, what does that mean? I go, that means you probably have a lot of resistance on that line, or it's spiced poorly, or both, or it's Cat 2. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows? I said, but that's not a good thing, dude. So but again, interpretation, that's it. No matter what tool you buy, special purpose or your scripts, people better be able to understand what it's trying to tell you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the other piece of it. And whether it's watching YouTube videos, whether it's going to class. And that's one of the things I do, the certification training for Fluke. And one of the things I tell them out of that is that the goal of this class is to make sure that you're doing it as fast and accurately as possible. And the worst thing that can happen is you have to come back and do it again. And if you do that, if it saves you from doing that once, the class is free. And so, with some of the sites that you're working on with this contract, you could take and ship Etherscope, or, in fact, one of the things that we did with the Etherscope in one place is we loaded Zoom on the Etherscope.
Oh yeah, right.
And the technician hooked up a set of Bluetooth headphones to it, and we were able to use the camera. And so I could see the wireless stats remotely. And then he was walking around aiming the camera, and he was right underneath an AP, but that's not the one we were connecting to. And so we were able to figure out that there was a problem with that AP.
Slick.
But being able to see what they're seeing, and that's one of the things I'm working on right now, is I've got an Oculus 3 headset. And one of the guys that used to work for Fluke and I both have them. So we meet like once a week in VR.
Nice.
But one of the goals is, how do we get it so you can see that forward-facing camera on there so I see what you're seeing? And now, so now it's like I'm looking at the world through your eyes.
Yeah.
But having these tools where we can ship them out to a site, whether it's the Etherscope, I got a case from Profitap that has their IOTA core. It has a span booster. It's got a tap. It's a really nice set of equipment. But the whole idea is it comes in a shipping case, so I can ship it out to a location. They can plug it in, and I don't have to go there because I can get equipment to them a lot faster than me.
Yeah. And what do you find, Mike, with the some of these tools that are built into, like, switches have cable testing within it? Have you had much luck with that?
Some of it gives me an idea of what's going on. The problem is that none of them really tell me where the problem is. And that's, if we can just replace the cable or move to a different drop, that's good. It's interesting you bring that up, though, because that would be one that would be kind of a fun one to do some experiments with, do a video on, would be how accurate are those? And, in the end, what's the best troubleshooting? How close can we get to figuring out what the problem is based on what the switch tells us?
Yeah, and I'm finding, like, when you have these switches plugged into, for example, a phone, and the phone has a pass-through on it, you got a PC plugged in a phone, it gives you really squirrely results. Sometimes it says the last 3 pairs are not working right, or they're shorted or whatever. And you run the test again, it says it's fine. And you run the test again, it says 2 of the 4 pairs are good. And I'm just like, what? So I'm finding that these, and you hit it on the head a moment ago, but I'm finding these tests, you kind of have to understand what it's telling you when it's not working out right, because just because it says the cable's bad doesn't mean it is. What's it plugged into, right?
And what it makes me think about is, like with the Fluke gear, factory recommends that on the certification equipment that you send it in every year and get it calibrated. So they've got like an ohm. And they use that to calibrate the calibration equipment that calibrates this, calibrates that. And so that when you're running a test, you're getting an accurate measurement. And so when you've gone back and tested your test equipment, then that helps either destroy your confidence in the results or boost that confidence. And so part of it is understanding how confident we are in our test equipment. And there are times where we can accept that maybe that Raspberry Pi running T-Shark isn't going to give me full line rate, but I don't need it for that. And so it's understanding the limitations of our test equipment as well. And that's part of it. And I guess if we want equipment that doesn't have a limitation, then we're going to pay for that.
Yeah, you have to.
And then what level of limitation can we stand to have?
Yeah, and I'm finding, I don't know about you, but back in the day when we first started, I always started near the client when we troubleshoot, because they're complaining. It's easier to work that way. And then we got progressively, I don't know why, the troubleshooting points moved closer to the trunks, backbones, whatever. and servers. And I find myself going back to the client because at the end of the day, if somebody's having an issue, why do I want to worry about a 10 gig port or a 1 gig port when I'm sitting beside Mary Jane, who's got a 1 gig port pushing 1 meg per second? Then yeah, I could use a laptop or a Profitap or even her PC. Just put T-Shark on it or capture it, right? Using a NetSH for crying out loud. You can do almost anything. But I think, like I said to you before, I think it's encouraging though that more network technicians I work with are more apt to trying new things. Where back in the day they were like, no.
Yep. This is how we've always done it.
Yeah. Whereas now it's and I like I'll be honest with you. Just last week somebody said to me, "When's the last time you used Wireshark?" And I said, "Maybe 2-3 weeks." Like you don't like I'm not going to use it for every like. Oh, you can't ping the server. Well, break out the Wireshark. Well, wait a minute. Like, come on.
I used it this week, and I'll tell you, it's one I haven't run into before, but I've got a Starlink backup, and I run all of my IoT stuff, all my lights and everything off of it. So if we do lose our internet provider, that I can still say turn the lights on or what have you. And so I was trying to simplify the connection. I removed all this stuff, and things weren't coming up and they were running slow. And I threw Wireshark on there. What I was seeing is maybe every 100th DNS query was getting a response. And it's like, well, that's weird. And then I poked around, and in the end, I had put a little Netgear GS105E switch in the middle with span running on. And I'd had that in there ever since I put the Starlink in. And I'd taken it out. And I had the Starlink connected directly to my MikroTik router. I put that Netgear switch back in. Everything's running fine.
No kidding.
So it's killing me now. I need to figure out why does the wired adapter on the Starlink, because it's a Gen 2 Starlink, why does that wired adapter work okay with the Netgear, but not the MikroTik? And the MikroTik works fine with the Netgear, but not the Starlink. And, and it goes back to some of the things we talked about earlier. Sometimes we just don't know. We don't have the equipment. We don't have the time. And I'll just leave that $20 switch in there.
Yeah.
And it'll be fine.
But now you know.
And now I know. Do not, I need to put a sticker on there. No matter how bad you want to. Don't remove this switch.
That's right. Put a little red LED on it. Make it go brighter as the speed goes up.